Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Paul and the Faithfulness of God by N.T. Wright, published by Fortress Press in 2013. We're going to take a look at some additional Greek and Roman overlap in the worlds that affected Paul. We're going to take a look at pages 256 to 276. We'll begin by looking at the triad on the left. We'll take a look at mediation and mysterion. And in block one, we're going to look at the Greek patterns of religion. All Greek cities were semi-autonomous. The Greek patterns of religion included the fact that the gods were distant and resided on Mount Olympus. Home worship took place at the hearth. So there was a in-home worship to the hearth goddess Hestia. But relationship between the believer and the god was ambiguous because the gods would provide prosperity and protection, but they did require a practice of sacrifice, and they weren't recognizably faithful. Instead, they could be very unpredictable, so these Greek gods could be unpredictable. Now, cultic observance, with regard to the whole city, sacrifice had to take place in the city shrine because it was the dwelling place of the god. Each shrine contained an idol as its god, a carved stone statue, and sacrifices in the temple were also inclusive of the distribution of the meat afterward or its sale in the marketplace. There was a shrine caretaker who supervised the order of cultic practices. Now, if you take a look at block 2, we're going to take a look at the mediation of the disclosure. How does the initiate hear the decision and the disclosure of the god? Each divine being looked after one aspect of the city. Intercession and petitioning was fourfold. There was the invoking of the god. There was the pacifying of the god through sacrifice. Then there was the petitioning of needs, which had to take place through a priest or a prophet. And then there was the anticipatory celebration of the expected response. After intercession, the worshiper would seek mediated disclosure of the truth. And that came about through the practice of the inspection of the animal entrails that was sacrificed, or by oracle at the shrine of Apollo. And those steps included the following: sacrifice was offered, then a female prophetess would inhale the smoke of the sacrifice, then the prophetess would make a pronouncement to a chamber of prophets, and those prophets would then convey the message to the worshiper. So there were patterns of this mediation of truth, and it basically broke down into a trifold structure. First was mystic madness. That meant that the worshiper took on a desire for a new mystic consciousness. Then there was the poetic madness, where the new consciousness would take up the new language of lyric narrative poetry. The story of the god would be presented in narrative, lyric, poetic narrative. But ultimately, the final state of disclosure would be eros love, not agape self-giving, but eros love is the final form of disclosure. But it was all mediated, and it was all through a priest or a prophet. Now in block 3, we'll take a look at this mystery or mysterion and this mediated disclosure, which both led to a real difference in the fact that they didn't really have a sacred text, which Paul, of course, could always refer to the scriptures, but these Greek pagan religions did not have sacred text. Sacred text was replaced by mysterion rites in the Greek religion, and the participant experienced agony, ecstasy, or a combination of both in the mystery worship. Promise offered by the god took the form of either better fate in the afterworld or transformation through mystical union with the divine, but it always usually resulted in frenzy rather than real substance, and there was teaching of the transmigration of souls. So we have an initial little triad here in 3b of the knowing of the Greek gods, and it is those three moments of the mystic consciousness, the poetic narrative, and the eros love. First, the initiate would seek mystic consciousness. That first had to be sought. Then the story of the god would be conveyed in lyric, poetic narrative. But final disclosure always was through the mediation of eros love, not agape, self-giving, but eros love. And so the mystery religions overall were very much an emotional type of frenzy and a mediation that really emphasized reaching that mystic plane of consciousness and being informed by the narrative story of the god itself. And it was always mediated through the prophetess, or a real series of trying to read omens and signs in whatever way possible, but many times through the sacrifice itself, through the examination of the entrails, or words from the prophetess who had inhaled the smoke of the sacrifice. So it was very much emotional, very much mystic, and always mediated. The worshiper never had access to the gods except through a prophetess or a priest. Now, that generally defines the Greek mystic religion, but it doesn't give us the specific information that we want to look at. And so we're going to look at the triad on the right and get more specific information from 266 to 276 on the dominant mystery religion of Mythras. The dominant mystery religion was the ever-present mystery religion of Mythras, and this mystery religion permeated Greece and Rome both. Very popular for Roman soldiers. It initially started in Persia. It was already present in Asia Minor and Tarsus both, and in the first century it was present and growing tremendously in popularity. It was a growing mystic religion. Strictly a male religion. Mithras was a sun god, a bull killer. There was a hierarchy of membership within the cult, and they did practice cultic ceremonies and harsh tests. Worship took place in chamber caves, and those chamber caves represented a microcosm of creation. They were decorated in zodiac symbols, including a picture of Mithras killing a bull in order to rescue the world. Rescue came through the blood of the bull. It was mystic salvation through the blood of the bull. They did practice a communal meal, but the ethic was basically the exhortation to be brave and resolute in defending the empire. So it was very much linked with the Roman Empire. But in addition to this real growing presence of the Mithras mystery religion, we also need to look at the Roman-Kollegia, because the Roman-Kollegia was a hierarchy of priesthood which was very prevalent during Paul's time also. So take a look at Block 2. Retired soldiers were given the gift of land, and that came especially in Philippi or in Corinth. Therefore, these retirement cities reflected the religion and the culture of Rome. So Paul would confront little mini Rome cultures in Philippi and in Corinth. And Roman religion was intertwined with Greek culture, along with the emergence of Rome as a world power. So there the sign names were very complex constructions. There was a difference between Greece and Rome, and difference in signification for Greece and signification for Rome, except Apollo, who remained consistent between the two. But there was a true Roman interpretation of the Greek divinities. So this all became a synergistic merging of traditions between Greece and Rome. Rome posited the cult of the Theos Hypistos, or the God Most High, and Rome arranged the divinities as a pantheon of world domination. The gods made up a pantheon of world domination. They posited the supreme triad of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, and they also posited gods of luck, and they posited the god of peace and justice. But luck, peace, and justice were always linked with the emperor, because Augustus said he was ushering in the new age of peace and justice. He was the embodiment of ushering in the new divine age. And so in Block 3, we can take a look at this synergistic influence of Rome and the new signs that would be defined by looking at the Roman-Kollegia under Augustus. Individual piety was focused around the hearth worship in one's home, and that marked out family identity, but communal piety was focused around the pomerium, and the pomerium was the sacred space of the city, and it was a space in which was emphasized the imperial cult of Rome. The pomerium and the imperial cult were very dominant, and they both possessed a priesthood that was linked to civil office as well. So you've got a real cross-section and interrelatedness between religious and political authority in the imperial cult. And so we end up with a note 3, the triad, that first you had individual sacred time at home at the hearth, but second you had communal sacred space at the pomerium for the imperial cult. And third, all sacred actions had to take place through the mediation of the collegios priesthood. And so note 4, the hierarchy of the collegia priesthood consisted of 5 levels. You had the Pontifex Maximus, or chief priest. You had the Pontifices, who were in charge of Roman religion. You had the augurs, the advisory board for proposed actions. And you had the 15 men, who were like scribes who interpreted the Sibylline books and functioned as the critique for outside foreign cults as well. And then the Epilones, who were the feast organizers. You had 5 levels of priesthood in this imperial cult, and the imperial cult was a mix of religion and political culture both. It wasn't strictly religious, it wasn't strictly political, it was a mixture of the religious and the political together, and therefore the emperor was very much prominently figured within this. And so you end up with the Greek concept of a collegia, the collegia levels of priesthood, the collegia priesthood, which took up that sacred space of the pomerium and centered itself all around the imperial cult. So that truly became the world that Paul would encounter on his missionary journeys. Very much so. You have to figure whenever he went to Philippi, he was entering a Roman soldier retirement city. Philippi would be very much involved with the mystery cult of Mithras, which is for soldiers. And it was also be very much permeated by the collegia Roman priesthood, and there would be the true contamination of the imperial cult everywhere. So Paul would be very much on very dangerous territory, because any religious or Christian positing that Paul made would be a challenge to Rome, not just to the Jewish authority in the synagogues. He would also be challenging the Collegia priesthood. He'd be also challenging the soldiers, Roman culture, and Roman religion. So Paul would end up creating a lot of confrontation and dangerous situations, which we know he did. But now we know why, because there was this very strong mixture of religion and culture, and there was also a very strong interplay between Greek divinities and Roman rewriting of the signs of Greek divinities. And so you had the synergistic compromise of traditions, you had a very strong priesthood, and you had an extremely prevalent and strong and growing mystic religion of Mythras. This is the world in which Paul entered in his ministry of proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ as Christos Messiah, Kyrios Lord, and Krinos Judge over the living and the dead. And to say that Christ is Lord, that's a challenge to the imperial cult that says that Caesar is Lord. And that is a challenge to the Evangelion gospel that Rome promises every city that is under their dominion, when Paul says, I bring a new gospel, I bring the gospel of Christ. So we can see why Paul would run into so much danger and confrontation, because of all these elements that were very much prevalent in Paul's world. So we've got a great, tremendous background teaching here by Professor Wright, and I think it really helps to get a better picture on what Paul was confronting in his missionary journeys. We will close out here, but we will have our recap and recall triad. I think it's important that we do that, so I will also present the recall triad right after this. That's going to wrap up this lesson on page 256 to page 276.